and will, in fact, must do what he promises. Now you have to ask yourself, what's going to happen when the Hezbollah rockets start hitting Tel Aviv? How will the Israelis react when there's a substantial accumulation of civilian casualties starting to run into the hundreds? What will Israel do? Israel has already said repeatedly in the past year that it expects in the next war the missiles will hit Tel Aviv. Actually, the retired head of Israeli military intelligence, he just gave a briefing last week, his last day, and he said this calm in the region is deceiving. And he said we expect in the next war the missiles will hit Tel Aviv. The prospect grows more terrifying when you bear in mind that everything I might have said thus far, I'll agree, it's speculation of a higher or lower degree, but it's speculation. But at one point there's no speculation. And that point is Israel will not accept another defeat in Lebanon. It's just not possible. If it looks as if a defeat is impending, then Israel will do what it has to do to make sure they don't suffer a third consecutive defeat in Lebanon. On the other hand, even if it looks as if the Hezbollah is losing, it's very unlikely that Iran will stay out, not from any particular solidarity, but from the knowledge that if Hezbollah is defeated, they're next. And so the pressure on Iran to intervene will be very strong if it looks like the Hezbollah is losing. What exactly will happen is, of course, impossible to predict. But I think the Americans, the French, the British, and all the rest of them, what they're hoping to do is to so isolate the Hezbollah with these sanctions, resolutions, the documentaries, the hysteria, the secret information, and so forth, that it'll make it impossible for Iran to intervene, because then it'll be accused of being a sanctions breaker and supporting the satanic Hezbollah. On the other hand, it'll be hard for them to stay out. There are variables. Mr. Erdogan, the head of Turkey, was in Lebanon the last few days, and he said, speaking directly to Israel, he said, stop the incitement in Lebanon. And now Said Hariri, the head of state of Lebanon, is in Iran. Because everybody understands what's coming, and the question is whether they can head it off. An Israeli attack on Hezbollah would consequently trigger a chain reaction, the outcome of which no sane person would want to contemplate. Where do we stand now? Well, there were some hopeful moments after the martyrdom of the members of the Freedom Flotilla. The pressure seemed to be exerted on Israel that it had to lift the siege of Gaza. I myself was, I think, rather naively hopeful, but Israel managed to the storm passed, and now John Ging, who's the director of operations for UNRWA, the main UN relief organization in Gaza, he said this past week that there is no tangible change for the people on the ground. It still is what it was. On the other hand, I think it would be wrong to underestimate the achievement of the people on the Freedom Flotilla. For a few moments, they managed to force the hands of the world's mightiest powers. For 3 years, the brutal, merciless, heartless blockade of Gaza was imposed without a peep, without a word from the international community. but the day after the martyrdom of the Martyr, all the world leaders suddenly discovered, every one of them was amazing to the revelation. They all discovered that the blockade of Gaza was unsustainable and it had to be lifted. The prison gates of Gaza had only been opened a few tiny inches at most, but those inches showed the latent power of a movement built on the simple truth that the occupation is inhuman and unjust. If the people in the Martyr showed us what to do, then the people in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Ramallah, they show us what not to do. Because there never has been, there isn't now, and there won't be for the foreseeable future, a peace process. That's not rhetoric. That's what a rational person concludes looking at the factual record. The peace process was said to have begun in September 1993 with the Oslo Accord and the famous handshake. Now 17 years have passed, and we hear peace process, peace process, peace process, peace process. But a rational person, he or she judges by results, by outcomes, not by words. So let's try to be rational. In September 1993, there were 250,000 illegal Jewish settlers in the occupied Palestinian territories. 17 years later, in 2010, there are 500,000 illegal Jewish settlers. The number has doubled. According to the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the Occupied Territories, Betzalel, they said that Israel has now annexed 42% of the West Bank for the settlements. So if you look at the results, if you look at the outcomes, what we have seen unfold over the past 17 years, a rational person concludes what we saw unfold was an annexation process. It was not a peace process, it was an annexation process. However, the annexation process, it needs the peace process. Because for the peace process, the annexation process couldn't continue. Every time Israel is told it has to stop building settlements, what does Israel say? We have to resolve it in the peace process. And so the peace process is what enables the annexation process. Some of you are thinking, but wait, you're leaving out the most recent history. Wasn't there a settlement freeze? So things have changed for the better. There was a settlement freeze. Technically, it began in November 2009, and it ended in September 26th. And everybody in this room, I'm sure, has heard about that settlement freeze. But what happened? The main Israeli organization that monitors the settlements is called Peace Now. It looked at a 10-month period, and this is what they concluded. On the ground, there is almost no freeze or even a visible slowdown. They said, settlement freeze, it was a fiction right from the outset. There was no settlement freeze. So some of you think, no, they can't be that dishonest. The media can't be so deceptive. I do have to say, to be fair, the best article on the topic of what actually happened wasn't in Der Spiegel. You know, it was an excellent article. No, that's fair. You have to be fair about these things. So what happened? It's very simple. 6 months before the settlement freeze was announced, Mr. Netanyahu tells the settlers, all you have to do is build the foundations for new homes. Just build lots of foundations. And then he announces the settlement freeze. But he says it only applies to new construction. And so all the foundations they continue to build. Does that mean Mr. Netanyahu is a complete fraud?
Yes,
no,
it does.
No. You have to give credit where credit's deserved. So, Peace Now, it wrote in Israel's most influential paper, Haaretz. This is what Peace Now said. Benjamin Netanyahu, he will probably not win the Nobel Peace Prize, but he is certainly likely to win the Nobel Prize for physics, or at least chemistry. Why? Because Mr. Netanyahu has discovered that contrary to what scientists had thought until now, water is not the only substance that expands instead of contracting when it freezes.